Hi guys, my name is Trinity, and if you are here, you must be here to talk about books because that's why I'm here. But today, I am going to be talking about prose and review language. And this subject came up in a Discord, and I realized that there are a lot of people who do not understand what we mean when we say certain words, either because they've not been in the review realm very long, or they just haven't had the education that leans towards knowing these specific words and phrases. And not that I'm saying that anybody is dumb or anything like that, but having a background in English literature, these are words that I tend to use that I don't think about people not knowing until I say them, and people ask me, well, what's that? What does that mean? And so I wanted to hop on here and talk to you guys about the language that a lot of reviewers use that maybe you have had some trouble understanding, or you've had some trouble piecing together exactly what they mean. And today we're going to be talking about prose in particular. And so I wanted to give some phrases, some words, throw them out there so that you guys will understand them better when people use them in the future. So the first thing I want to talk about is purple prose. I'm sure that you guys have seen this used a lot and have been questioning, what does purple prose actually mean? Because we as reviewers have a tendency to call out certain points in the writing of the story. So purple prose means overly indulgent description. If you guys have watched my channel for a while, you will know that this is something I do not like. Now, this again is going to all relate to preference, whether you like it or not, but overly indulgent description, purple prose, however, is overly indulgent to the point of losing clarity in your prose or plot. Overindulgent to the point that half the time it doesn't make sense. There are a lot of absurdist writers who use purple prose kind of as a way to prove how absurd they actually are. But it gives the reader a sense of discombobulation. So whether that is describing a sunset or clothing or anything of that nature, or just trying to set a scene and where you're using a lot of metaphors, and again, overuse of description. A book that has become recently popular for purple prose is This Is How You Lose the Time War. I myself have not read this, but from the way everyone else talks about it, I would say it's fair to say that this is probably purple prose. And it is absurdist, it is very far-fetched, and like I said, I have not read that book myself, but I myself do not enjoy purple prose, so it's not likely that I will actually pick up a book, especially if I hear the words purple prose being used. One example of this that I have read is The Book Thief. Now, I did end up DNFing this book mainly because of the purple prose and the character-driven story. But when you are looking at something abstract such as death, watching a young girl live her life, then the purple prose does tend to come up quite a bit as metaphors are used in overabundance, and we get a lot of description that's not necessarily necessary. So the next one that I would like to talk about is beige prose. Now, this is not necessarily utilized in as many forms, or I haven't heard as many people talk about this as I have purple, but beige prose basically means utilitarian prose. There's not a lot of description at all. Brandon Sanderson is a good person to point out for this because while his writing is good, there's not very much description at all. Now, the Stormlight Archive is the exception to this, but generally speaking, Brandon Sanderson does not dwell on description. And so you usually hear utilitarian prose or beige prose in association with him. And basically that just means that the descriptive words aren't always utilized in the best way. And descriptors tend to not be there. They tend to fall to the wayside. But that is the only thing that beige prose means, just utilitarian in the use of descriptors. One more that I would like to point out that I don't always hear, but I've heard a couple of times people say blue. And blue prose means that it is vulgar. And again, I don't hear this used quite often, or I don't hear this used quite as often as I hear purple or even beige. But blue prose just means that there's a lot of cursing, it's vulgar, it's hard-hitting, like in your face with the vulgarity that is present. And that could be said about The Pariah by Anthony Ryan, The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. There are just not a lot of people that say blue anymore, but you might have heard the term cursing a blue streak. That's where that comes from. And like I said, it's not one that's used very often, but if you ever hear someone say that the prose was blue and they don't elaborate, they are just saying that there's a lot of vulgarity in the book itself. Now let's talk about lyrical and flowery. These two are usually used in consensus with each other. However, they are two separate things. And I want to point out the difference because I have seen people say lyrical when they meant flowery and flowery when they meant lyrical. And so I want to give the two terms a little bit of separation. So lyrical, when you are writing a book, the way that you get lyrical writing is word choice and sentence structure. It's not necessarily that it's overly descriptive. So lyrical, The Name of the Wind is probably one of the best known fantasy books that utilizes lyrical prose. And basically this means that you can settle into it really well, that the writing just kind of flows over you and flows so well that you just get absorbed in the story. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it is flowery, but it does mean that the sentence structure was so well thought out that you get just this beautiful landscape to navigate through. So The Name of the Wind, like I said, Erin A. Craig is also very, very good at this. And there is a scene about pancakes in her newest book that I want to read to you, but I won't. But lyrical prose can really suck you in and really get you imagining the world, and it flows very, very well. So when you're talking about purple prose versus lyrical prose, one of the things that stands out as a huge difference is lyrical prose flows well, purple prose does not. It is usually broken up and breaks the flow of the writing. That is one of the things that stands out about purple prose. Now, flowery just means a lot of description. That does not necessarily mean that it's lyrical. Flowery is an overuse of descriptive words. It does not always lend itself to purple, but it does mean that excessive description exists. And one of the best examples I could give of this is Sarah J. Maas. She is very flowery. Laini Taylor is very flowery. But when they start to describe something, their descriptions linger. They last longer than they need to. And this can sometimes throw people in their reading, especially if you don't like description. I don't like a lot of description. However, I do think that Laini Taylor, her lyrical prose offsets her flowery prose. And that's why I want to make a distinction, because Laini Taylor can write well. She does have this great sense of plot. She does know when to cut her descriptions off so that they don't venture into purple. And it makes it very enjoyable and still very description heavy. But there are a lot of people who like purple prose. There are a lot of people who like lyrical prose. There are a lot of people who like flowery prose. I just don't happen to be one of them for the most part. And it's going to determine on your taste whether or not you like any of these styles of writing. Now, one other descriptive word for prose that I want to point out, because I didn't know that this was not a word that people used a lot. And so when I said it, I had a couple of questions of what does this mean? And that would be verbose. Stephen King is the king of verbose. And what that means is, while his writing may not be purple, it is lengthy and unnecessarily so. What could take 5 words to say, he chooses to use 12. And so that is where a lot of people want to place purple onto King, but that's not quite what he is, because his descriptors are not always metaphorical. They don't always have another meaning. They don't break the pacing of the story, but there's just a lot of it. And he doesn't just do this with description either. There's a lot of times where he just rattles along and you end up going, what did I just read? Or at least for myself anyway. But that is the distinction again between verbose and purple. But none of these things are bad if you like them. None of these things are negative connotations unless you choose to take them that way. But that is what those words mean. And of course, there are many other ways to describe prose. There are many other ways to talk about books and writing in books, but those are the ones that I hear used most often, or that I've used myself and had a lot of questions as to what does that mean. And I wanted to go ahead and address them in a video so that you guys had a quick place to come see what it is that these words actually mean. Like, subscribe, do all the fun things, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!